The morning mist hung low over the Zephyrian Academy for interspecies learning, casting long shadows across the crystalline structures that housed one of the galaxy's most prestigious educational institutions. The Academy sat on a floating island above the gas giant Kepler 442b, its anti-gravity generators humming softly in the thin atmosphere. Marcus Chen adjusted his human standard oxygen mask and checked his tablet one more time before entering the main academic building. As the only human instructor at the academy, he had grown accustomed to the curious stares and whispered conversations that followed him through the corridors. Today marked his third month teaching basic Earth history to a diverse group of alien students, and he was finally beginning to feel comfortable in this strange new world. The Academy was home to over 2,000 students from 47 different species across the Galactic Federation. Walking through the halls was like stepping into a living museum of evolution. Tall, graceful Etherians floated past on gossamer wings, their bioluminescent skin pulsing in soft blues and greens. Stocky Carathians lumbered by, their rock-like skin clicking against the polished floors. Slender Nexari moved in perfect synchronization, their hive-mind consciousness allowing them to navigate crowds with impossible precision. Marcus had been recruited to the Academy 6 months ago as part of a cultural exchange program. Humans had only recently joined the Galactic Federation, and there was tremendous curiosity about Earth species throughout the galaxy. What made the invitation particularly surprising was humanity's relatively primitive technology compared to most Federation members. While other species had mastered faster-than-light travel centuries ago, humans had only recently developed basic spacecraft capable of reaching the nearest star systems. "Professor Chen," called a melodic voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Lyrian, one of his most attentive students. The young Vortanian's blue scales shimmered in the corridor lighting, and her large, expressive eyes showed excitement. "I finished reading about the human migration patterns you assigned. The way your species spread across Earth without any telepathic communication is fascinating." Marcus smiled. "Thank you, Lyrian. I'm glad you found it interesting. Most species in the Federation seem surprised by how humans accomplish so much without natural telepathic abilities." "It's not just the lack of telepathy," said Krex, a Carathian student whose voice rumbled like shifting stones. "Your species also lacks natural armor, poison production, electromagnetic senses, or enhanced physical capabilities. How did humans become the dominant species on your planet?" This was a question Marcus encountered frequently. Among the Federation species, humans appeared to be evolutionary weaklings. Most aliens possessed some form of natural defense mechanism, enhanced senses, or specialized abilities that gave them advantages in their environments. Humans seem to have developed none of these traits. "We use tools, cooperation, and adaptability," Marcus explained as they walked toward his classroom. "Humans became excellent problem solvers because we had to be. We couldn't fly like Etherians or communicate telepathically like Nexari, so we developed technology and social structures to overcome our limitations." The conversation was interrupted by a deep, resonant alarm that echoed through the building. The pleasant ambient lighting shifted to pulsing red, and automated announcements began broadcasting in multiple languages. Marcus's universal translator kicked in, converting the alien speech into English. "Emergency protocols activated. All students and faculty report to designated safe zones immediately. Security breach in Laboratory Complex 7. This is not a drill." The hallway erupted into controlled chaos as students and teachers began moving toward emergency exits. Marcus noticed how different species reacted to the alarm. The Nexari immediately formed perfect formation lines, their shared consciousness allowing instant coordination. Etherians rose toward the ceiling, their natural flight instincts taking over. Carathians moved slowly but steadily, their massive frames creating protective barriers for smaller species. "Professor Chen," Lyrian's voice carried a note of concern. Laboratory Complex 7 houses the Xenobiology Research Facility. That's where they keep specimens from dangerous worlds for study. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard about the Academy's research programs, but had never visited the laboratory complex. The facility supposedly housed some of the most dangerous creatures ever discovered, all contained within advanced security systems for scientific study. "What kind of specimens?" Marcus asked as they joined the flow of beings moving toward the emergency exits. Krex's rocky features showed worry. Apex predators from death worlds, creatures that evolved on planets so hostile that few species can even visit them safely. The Academy studies them to understand how life adapts to extreme environments. The emergency announcements continued, providing updates that grew increasingly alarming. "Security containment failure confirmed. Multiple specimens have breached primary barriers. All personnel maintain safe distance from Laboratory Complex 7. Military response units have been dispatched." Through the large windows lining the corridor, Marcus could see small aircraft approaching the Academy from several directions. The Federation military moved with impressive speed, but he wondered if their response would be adequate for whatever had escaped from the laboratory. As they reached the emergency staging area in the main courtyard, Marcus observed the organized efficiency of the evacuation. Each species had designated gathering points, and faculty members were conducting head counts to ensure all students were accounted for. The Academy's emergency procedures had clearly been well planned and frequently practiced. Director Xanthor, a distinguished Etherian with silver-tipped wings, floated above the crowd to address the assembled students and faculty. His telepathic voice reached every mind simultaneously, automatically translated for species without natural telepathic abilities. "Students and colleagues, we have experienced a significant security breach in our xenobiology research facility. 3 Class Alpha specimens have escaped containment and are currently loose within Laboratory Complex 7. The facility has been sealed, but we cannot guarantee the barriers will hold indefinitely." Murmurs of concern rippled through the crowd. Marcus noticed that even the typically calm Nexari showed signs of agitation, their usual perfect synchronization slightly disrupted. "Class Alpha specimens represent the most dangerous creatures ever discovered by Federation science," Director Xanthor continued. "These beings evolved on worlds where survival required extreme predatory capabilities. They have been brought here for study precisely because they represent the ultimate expression of natural lethality." Marcus raised his hand. "Director Xanthor, what specific creatures are we dealing with?" The director's large eyes focused on Marcus. "Professor Chen, the escaped specimens include a shadow maw from the tidally locked world of Nix 7, a crystal crusher from the high-gravity planet Titan's Fall, and most concerning, a void hunter from the radiation-soaked wasteland of Kepler 78c. The reaction from the crowd was immediate and intense. Several students cried out in their native languages, while faculty members exchanged worried glances. Marcus realized that his lack of knowledge about these creatures left him unable to fully appreciate the danger they represented. "For our newer faculty member," Director Xanthor said, nodding toward Marcus, "these creatures represent apex predators from some of the most hostile environments ever discovered. The Shadow Maw can phase partially out of normal space-time, making it nearly impossible to track or contain. The Crystal Crusher possesses armor that can withstand direct energy weapon fire and strength capable of crushing reinforced metal. The Void Hunter is perhaps most dangerous of all. It evolved in a radioactive environment that killed most other life forms, developing the ability to track prey across vast distances and adapt to almost any environmental condition." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The advanced technology of the Federation had allowed them to capture and study creatures that sounded more like mythical monsters than real animals. The fact that these beings had broken free from supposedly secure containment suggested a catastrophic failure of the Academy's safety systems. The military response teams are equipped with advanced containment technology, the director continued. However, we must be prepared for the possibility that standard protocols may prove insufficient. These creatures have never been loose in an environment with so many potential prey species gathered in one location. Through the Academy's emergency communication system, updates continued to arrive from the laboratory complex. The initial optimism about quickly containing the situation began to fade as reports came in of destroyed security equipment and failed containment attempts. "All military teams, this is laboratory control," came a tense voice over the communication system. "The Shadow Maw has disappeared from our tracking systems entirely. Thermal imaging shows no trace, and electromagnetic sensors are not detecting any movement. Recommend expanding search perimeter to include all Academy buildings." Marcus noticed the Etherian students clustering closer together, their natural telepathic abilities probably allowing them to share their fear more directly than other species. The Karathians had formed a protective circle around smaller students, while the Nexari maintained their formation discipline despite obvious stress. "Professor Chen," Lyrian said quietly, "in Vortanian culture, we have legends about creatures like these, beings so perfectly adapted to killing that they become like forces of nature rather than mere animals. Most species avoided the death worlds entirely rather than risk encountering such creatures." Marcus found himself thinking about Earth's own apex predators. Humans had shared their world with lions, tigers, bears, sharks, and countless other dangerous creatures. Through tools, intelligence, and cooperation, humanity had not only survived, but eventually become the dominant species on the planet. However, the creatures now loose in the Academy sounded far more dangerous than anything Earth had produced. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Marcus realized they had been in emergency lockdown for over 3 hours, and the situation showed no signs of resolution. The military teams had managed to maintain the perimeter around Laboratory Complex 7, but they had made no progress in actually recapturing the escaped specimens. "Director Xanthor," called Professor Zelani, a senior faculty member from the Karathian homeworld, "what is our contingency plan if the military cannot contain these creatures? The Academy houses thousands of students from species that have never encountered such predators." The director's wings dimmed slightly, a sign of stress among Etherians. "Professor Zelani, the Federation Military Command is consulting with xenobiology experts throughout the galaxy. If necessary, we may need to evacuate the Academy entirely and allow the military to use more extreme containment methods." Marcus understood the implication. More extreme methods likely meant weapons powerful enough to destroy not only the escaped creatures, but potentially large portions of the Academy as well. The floating island that housed the institution represented decades of construction and countless irreplaceable research materials. As darkness began to fall, emergency lighting activated throughout the courtyard. The Academy's normally beautiful architecture took on an ominous appearance in the harsh, artificial illumination. Marcus could see military aircraft maintaining patrol patterns around the laboratory complex, their searchlights sweeping continuously across the buildings. "Professor Chen," Director Xanthor approached him directly, "I realize this situation must be particularly challenging for you. Humans have had no previous exposure to creatures of this type. If you wish, we can arrange for immediate evacuation to a Federation medical station where you can receive trauma counseling." Marcus considered the offer but found himself declining. "Thank you, Director, but I'd prefer to stay with my students. If the Academy is facing this crisis, then as faculty, I should be here to help however I can." The Director's expression showed surprise. "Professor Chen, I must emphasize that these creatures represent a level of danger that most Federation species actively avoid. Your homeworld has prepared you for many challenges, but nothing like this." Marcus nodded in understanding, but something deep in his mind disagreed with the director's assessment. Earth had been a dangerous world in its own way, and humanity had survived by developing traits that might prove more valuable than anyone realized. The first sign that everything was about to get much worse came at exactly 11:47 p.m. Academy Standard Time. A deep, rumbling sound rolled across the complex, followed by the distinctive whine of energy weapons firing at maximum power. Through the darkness, brilliant flashes of light illuminated the laboratory buildings as military teams engaged something moving between the structures. Marcus stood with his students near the emergency shelter, watching the distant battle unfold. The universal translator in his ear crackled with urgent military communications that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Target has breached the secondary perimeter. Repeat, the Crystal Crusher has broken through reinforced barriers and is moving toward the residential complex. All units converge on Grid Sector 7 Alpha. Director Xanthor received a priority communication on his personal device, his luminescent skin pulsing rapidly as he processed the information. When he looked up, his expression had changed from concern to outright fear. The situation has escalated beyond our worst projections, he announced to the assembled faculty. The military teams have been unable to contain any of the 3 specimens. The Shadow Maw has completely vanished from all detection methods. The Void Hunter is demonstrating adaptation capabilities that exceed all previous observations. And the Crystal Crusher has just destroyed a section of the laboratory complex's outer wall. As if summoned by his words, a tremendous crash echoed across the academy grounds. A section of the laboratory complex's crystalline structure collapsed, sending debris cascading into the courtyard below. Emergency lighting flickered throughout the facility as power systems struggled to compensate for damaged infrastructure. "All personnel, this is emergency command," came a new voice over the communication system. "We have multiple containment failures. The laboratory complex is no longer secure. Recommend immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel to minimum safe distance." Marcus noticed that several of the alien students were showing signs of panic despite their species' natural composure. Lyrian's scales had shifted to a pale white color, while Krex's usual steady presence seemed shaken. The Nexari students were huddling together, their collective consciousness probably amplifying their shared fear. "Professor Chen," Lyrian said, her voice barely above a whisper, "the stories about creatures like these always end the same way. They cannot be reasoned with, negotiated with, or deterred. They exist only to hunt and kill. That's what made them the ultimate survivors on their homeworlds." Before Marcus could respond, a new alarm joined the cacophony of emergency signals. This one was different. A high-pitched, piercing sound that seemed to cut through all other noise. The director's expression shifted to something approaching terror. "That's the proximity alarm for the educational complex," he said. "One of the specimens has left the laboratory area and entered the main academy buildings." Through the windows of the nearest academic building, Marcus could see emergency lighting activating in sequence as something moved through the corridors. Whatever it was moved fast and with purpose, triggering motion sensors throughout the structure. "Military command. This is Academy Control," Director Xanthor spoke into his communication device. "We need immediate extraction of all personnel. The specimens are now in the educational complex where students and faculty are sheltering." The response was immediate, but not encouraging. "Academy Control extraction vessels are being repositioned to maintain safe distance. Military analysis suggests standard evacuation procedures may attract the attention of the specimens and result in massive casualties." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. They were essentially trapped on the floating island with 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, and the military was afraid to come too close for rescue operations. The lights in the building across the courtyard suddenly went out completely, plunging several floors into darkness. Emergency backup power flickered on moments later. But the message was clear. Something inside the building was causing significant damage to the infrastructure. "Director!" called Professor Thane, a Nexari instructor whose usual calm demeanor showed obvious cracks. "Our collective consciousness is detecting movement patterns consistent with active hunting behavior. Whatever is in that building is not randomly searching, it's tracking specific targets." The implications hit Marcus immediately. These creatures hadn't just escaped by accident. They were now actively hunting the thousands of students and faculty members trapped in the Academy's emergency shelters. A new sound joined the chaos, a low, haunting call that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The alien students reacted with visible terror, many covering their auditory organs or retreating further into their emergency groups. "That's a shadow maw hunting call," whispered Professor Zalani. "It uses dimensional manipulation to project its voice across multiple locations simultaneously. The call disorients prey and makes the creature impossible to locate until it attacks." Marcus found himself thinking about Earth's predators and how humans had learned to deal with dangerous animals. Throughout human history, people had faced lions, tigers, bears, crocodiles, and countless other creatures that were stronger, faster, and better armed than humans. Yet humanity had survived and thrived by developing strategies that other species had never needed to consider. "Director Xanthor," Marcus said, stepping forward, "what do we know about these creatures' hunting patterns? How do they typically select and pursue prey?" The director's bioluminescent skin pulsed in confusion. "Professor Chen, I'm not certain why that information would be relevant. Our priority must be survival and evacuation. On Earth, humans learn to coexist with apex predators by understanding their behavior," Marcus explained. "Every predator has specific patterns, preferences, and limitations. Even the most dangerous creatures follow predictable rules." Krex rumbled in disagreement. "Professor Chen, these are not ordinary predators. They evolved on death worlds where nothing else could survive. They have no natural enemies, no evolutionary pressure to develop restraint or predictable behavior." Marcus considered this, but found himself unconvinced. Every living thing, no matter how dangerous, operates according to some kind of logical system. That's how evolution works. These creatures survived because they were efficient killers, which means their behavior must follow efficient patterns. Before anyone could respond to his theory, a section of the building across the courtyard exploded outward in a shower of crystalline debris. Through the hole in the wall, something massive moved in the darkness. A creature easily 3 times the size of a human, covered in what appeared to be natural armor that reflected the emergency lighting like polished metal. "The Crystal Crusher," Director Xanthor said unnecessarily. The creature paused at the edge of the destroyed wall, its massive head turning as it surveyed the courtyard. Even from a distance, Marcus could see rows of gleaming teeth and eyes that seemed to glow with their own internal light. The beast's muscles rippled beneath its armor as it tested the air, obviously searching for something specific. "It's scenting," Marcus said quietly, "looking for prey signs." "Professor Chen," Lyrian's voice was tight with fear, "how could you possibly know that?" Marcus found himself drawing on knowledge he hadn't consciously accessed in years. On Earth, humans learned to read predator behavior for survival. The way it's holding its head, testing the air currents, that's classic scent-tracking posture. The Crystal Crusher suddenly turned in their direction, its glowing eyes focusing on the emergency shelter area. Even across the distance, Marcus could see intelligence in those eyes. Not just animal cunning, but genuine strategic thinking. "It's identified our location," Professor Thane said, the Nexari's collective consciousness probably providing detailed analysis. "Distance approximately 300 meters. Estimated time to reach our position at maximum charge speed, 43 seconds. The military response was immediate but ineffective. Energy weapons fired from concealed positions around the courtyard, striking the creature with brilliant bursts of concentrated power. The Crystal Crusher barely seemed to notice the attacks, its natural armor absorbing or deflecting the energy blasts without apparent damage. "All units, this is Strike Team Alpha," came an urgent voice over the communication system. "Standard energy weapons are ineffective. Creature appears immune to concentrated plasma fire. Requesting authorization for heavy ordnance." "Negative, Strike Team Alpha," responded Military Command. "Heavy ordnance would destroy sections of the Academy and potentially cause civilian casualties. Continue engagement with standard protocols." Marcus watched the futile battle and felt something click into place in his mind. The military was treating this like a technological problem, trying to overcome the creature's defenses with superior firepower. But humans had learned long ago that the most effective way to deal with dangerous animals wasn't always through superior force. "Director Xanthor," Marcus said urgently, "I need to know everything about these creatures' original environments. What were the conditions on their homeworlds? What did they hunt? How did they establish territory?" "Professor Chen, this is not the time for academic curiosity," the director replied, his attention focused on the approaching monster. "It's not curiosity," Marcus insisted. "It's tactical analysis. Humans survived on Earth by understanding predator behavior, not by being stronger or faster." The Crystal Crusher had begun moving toward their position, each step sending tremors through the floating platform. The creature moved with surprising grace for something so massive, but Marcus noticed something important about its approach pattern. "It's moving cautiously," he observed. Even an apex predator from a death world shows caution in an unfamiliar environment. Lyrian looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "Professor Chen, that thing is the size of a small building and appears to be indestructible. Why would it show caution?" Marcus found himself accessing memories of nature documentaries, hunting trips with his grandfather, and countless hours spent observing animal behavior during his childhood on Earth. Humans had been prey animals before they became predators, and that evolutionary history had taught them to think like both hunter and hunted. "Because intelligence and efficiency go together," Marcus explained. "The creature is assessing threats, escape routes, and potential ambush points. It's not just charging blindly because blind aggression is inefficient and dangerous." The military teams were continuing their futile attacks, but Marcus noticed something they were missing. Each time the weapons fired, the Crystal Crusher paused briefly and adjusted its approach angle. The creature wasn't just ignoring the attacks, it was learning from them. "The energy weapons aren't hurting it, but they're providing information," Marcus said. "It's using the attack patterns to identify human positions and probably weapon capabilities." Director Xanthor finally seemed to grasp what Marcus was suggesting. "You believe you can predict its behavior?" "I think I can understand it," Marcus replied. "Every predator operates on risk-reward calculations. Even the most dangerous creatures avoid unnecessary risks if they can achieve their goals more efficiently." The Crystal Crusher was now less than 100 meters away, and the emergency shelter's barriers looked pathetically inadequate against something that had just demolished reinforced laboratory walls. The creature paused again, this time for a longer assessment period. Marcus stepped away from the shelter toward the open courtyard. Several voices called out in alarm, but he ignored them. Something deep in his evolutionary memory was telling him that running and hiding were exactly the wrong responses to this situation. "Professor Chen!" Lyrian shouted. "What are you doing?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. He was watching the creature's body language, reading the subtle signs that millions of years of human evolution had programmed into his subconscious mind. The Crystal Crusher had stopped moving forward and was now studying this new development with obvious interest. Human ancestors had faced saber-toothed cats, cave bears, and pack hunters that were individually much stronger and better armed than any human. They had survived by being smart, unpredictable, and most importantly, by refusing to behave like typical prey animals. Marcus took another step forward, directly toward the most dangerous creature in the known galaxy. The crystal crusher tilted its massive head, clearly confused by this unprecedented behavior. For the first time since the crisis began, the apex predator looked uncertain. Marcus continued walking toward the crystal crusher, his movements deliberate but not aggressive. Behind him, he could hear urgent whispers and what sounded like several alien languages expressing variations of the same concept. The human had lost his mind. The massive predator remained motionless, its glowing eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that would have terrified most beings. But Marcus wasn't looking at the creature's weapons, the gleaming teeth, the razor-sharp claws, the armor that could withstand military-grade energy weapons. Instead, he was reading its posture, the subtle shifts in its stance, the way it held its head. 20 meters, 15 meters, 10 meters. The crystal crusher suddenly made a sound, not the aggressive roar everyone expected, but something closer to a questioning rumble. Marcus had heard similar sounds from Earth's large predators when they encountered something unexpected that didn't fit their usual prey categories. "Easy," Marcus said in a calm, steady voice. "I'm not running, I'm not hiding, and I'm not attacking. You're trying to figure out what I am." The creature's head tilted slightly to one side. It was clearly intelligent enough to recognize that Marcus's behavior didn't match any normal prey response patterns. Marcus stopped walking when he was close enough to see his reflection in the creature's armor-like skin. At this distance, the crystal crusher could have killed him in a fraction of a second. Instead, it continued to study him with obvious confusion. "You're an apex predator," Marcus continued in the same calm tone. "But you're also smart. Smart enough to recognize when something doesn't add up." From the emergency shelter, Director Xanthor's telepathic voice reached Marcus's mind. "Professor Chen, please retreat slowly. Do not make any sudden movements." Marcus ignored the advice. His grandfather had taught him about dealing with dangerous animals during hunting trips in Montana. The old man had faced down charging bears and aggressive wolves using principles that seemed to apply even to alien Death World predators. "The problem with being an apex predator," Marcus said to the creature, "is that you're used to everything being afraid of you. But humans didn't evolve on a safe world either. We just developed different survival strategies." The crystal crusher took a half-step backward. It was the first time since escaping containment that the creature had shown anything resembling retreat behavior. The change didn't go unnoticed by the military teams or the watching academics. Marcus could see understanding beginning to dawn on the creature's face. Millions of years of evolution had programmed it to recognize prey animals, predators, and threats. But Marcus wasn't fitting into any of those categories. He was displaying behavior that the creature's instincts couldn't classify. "You hunt things that run," Marcus continued. "Things that hide. Things that fight back with claws and teeth and natural weapons. But I'm not doing any of those things. I'm just standing here talking to you like we're having a conversation." The creature made another questioning sound, softer than before. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. An apex predator experiencing genuine confusion about how to respond to potential prey. Behind the creature, Marcus noticed movement in the shadows. Something else was approaching, something that seemed to bend light around itself, making it difficult to focus on directly. The Shadow Maw had arrived. But instead of feeling increased fear, Marcus felt a strange sense of confirmation. His approach was working with one of the deadliest creatures ever discovered. Now he had to see if the same principles applied to all of them. "Hello," Marcus said, addressing the half-visible shape moving through the shadows. "I can see you're trying to decide whether I'm worth the effort." The Shadow Maw materialized partially, its form shifting between solid and translucent. It was smaller than the crystal crusher, but somehow more unsettling, a creature that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. The two predators looked at each other, then back at Marcus. They were clearly communicating in some way, probably trying to determine whether this strange being represented a threat, prey, or something else entirely. "You're both pack hunters in your own ways," Marcus observed. "The Crystal Crusher uses brute force and armor. The Shadow Maw uses stealth and dimensional manipulation. But you both rely on fear responses from your prey." Marcus heard footsteps behind him and turned to see a third creature emerging from the darkness. The Void Hunter was larger than the Shadow Maw, but smaller than the Crystal Crusher, its skin showing radiation burns that looked like natural camouflage. This creature's eyes glowed with an inner radioactive light that should have been terrifying. Instead, Marcus felt a familiar recognition. "And you're the tracker. You can probably follow scent trails across entire star systems and adapt to environmental conditions that would kill most other life forms." All three apex predators now stood within a 30-meter radius of Marcus, forming a rough triangle. By all rights, he should have been dead several times over. Instead, the creatures seemed to be waiting for something. "The thing about humans," Marcus said, raising his voice so the watching crowd could hear him, "is that we evolved on a world full of creatures that could kill us easily. We survived by being smart, cooperative, and most importantly, by refusing to act like prey." He turned slowly, making eye contact with each creature in turn. "You're all apex predators from death worlds, but every death world teaches the same lesson. Intelligence and adaptation matter more than raw power." Marcus pulled out his tablet and activated its holographic display system. Images of Earth's most dangerous predators appeared in the air between him and the three aliens creatures: lions, tigers, grizzly bears, great white sharks, crocodiles, and dozens of others. "These are some of the predators humans shared Earth with," Marcus said. "Every one of them could kill an unarmed human easily. Stronger, faster, better weapons, better senses. But humans became the dominant species anyway." The three creatures moved closer to study the holographic displays. Marcus could see genuine curiosity in their expressions, something that probably hadn't been documented in any Federation research. "We didn't dominate through force," Marcus continued. "We dominated through understanding. We learned to read predator behavior, to predict it, to work with it instead of against it." The Crystal Crusher made a sound that was almost conversational. The Shadow Maw solidified completely, apparently fascinated by the images. The Void Hunter's glowing eyes focused on the display with obvious intelligence. "You three represent the ultimate expression of predator evolution," Marcus said. "But evolution always involves cooperation and mutual benefit, even between predators and prey. Otherwise, ecosystems collapse." Marcus closed the holographic display and looked directly at the Crystal Crusher. "You're not hunting because you're hungry. You're hunting because you're confused and stressed. Someone brought you to an alien environment, kept you in containment, and now you're free, but have no idea how to find your way home." The creature's posture changed subtly. Marcus had hit something important. "The Federation scientists who captured you probably never tried to communicate," Marcus continued. "They treated you like specimens instead of intelligent beings. But you're not just killing machines. You're survivors who evolved complex social and territorial behaviors." Marcus turned to address the watching crowd directly. "Director Xanthor, these creatures aren't randomly violent. They're trying to establish territory and figure out the social hierarchy of this new environment. They broke out of containment because they felt trapped and threatened." The director's bioluminescent skin pulsed rapidly as he processed this information. "Professor Chen, are you suggesting that these creatures can be reasoned with?" "I'm suggesting that they can be understood," Marcus replied. "Every intelligent species in the Federation communicates and cooperates. These creatures are intelligent. They just don't communicate the way most Federation species expect." Marcus pulled up another holographic display, this time showing star charts. "Each of you comes from a different world," he said to the three predators. Nix 7, Titan's Fall, and Kepler 78c. You're probably feeling the same thing any intelligent being would feel when kidnapped and held prisoner. You want to go home. The Shadow Maw made a sound that was almost like a question. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. The creature was actually trying to communicate. The Federation has faster-than-light travel, Marcus said. They could return you to your homeworlds if they understood that you're not just animals to be studied. Marcus turned back to Director Xanthor. These creatures aren't monsters. They're refugees who were taken from their homes against their will. The real problem isn't their dangerous nature. It's that nobody ever tried to treat them like intelligent beings. The implications hit the watching crowd like a wave. Throughout Federation history, first contact protocols existed for every newly discovered species, but these protocols had never been applied to creatures classified as specimens rather than sentient beings. Professor Chen, the director said slowly, you're suggesting that our entire approach to xenobiology research has been fundamentally flawed. I'm suggesting that humans have experience with something most Federation species never developed, Marcus replied. We learned to coexist with predators instead of just avoiding them or trying to control them through force. Marcus addressed the three creatures directly. I can't promise you'll be returned home immediately, but I can promise that if you stop the hunting behavior, people here will start treating you like intelligent beings instead of dangerous animals. The Crystal Crusher made what sounded like a considering rumble. The Shadow Maw flickered between visible and invisible several times, apparently thinking. The Void Hunter's glowing eyes focused on Marcus with what looked like evaluation. Then, one by one, each creature made a gesture that was unmistakably a sign of agreement. The Crystal Crusher lowered its massive head in what could only be described as a nod. The Shadow Maw solidified completely and remained still. The Void Hunter settled into a resting posture that clearly indicated non-aggressive intent. The emergency alarms stopped. The military weapons powered down. Across the academy courtyard, thousands of students and faculty members stared in amazement as three of the galaxy's most dangerous predators calmly waited for further communication. Director Xanthor floated down from his position above the crowd, his expression showing a mixture of awe and embarrassment. Professor Chen, in 40 years of Federation science, no one has ever attempted to communicate with apex predators from death worlds. Because no one ever needed to, Marcus replied. Most Federation species evolved on relatively safe worlds or developed abilities that let them avoid dangerous predators entirely. Humans are probably the only species that survived by learning to understand and cooperate with creatures that could easily kill us. The director's skin pulsed in what Marcus had learned was a sign of deep thought among Etherians. Professor Chen, this revelation has profound implications for Federation science policy. We may have misclassified hundreds of species as non-sentient simply because they didn't communicate in ways we recognized. Marcus nodded. On Earth, humans spent thousands of years learning to read the body language and behavior patterns of other species. It became an essential survival skill. Most Federation species probably never developed these abilities because they didn't need them. Over the following hours, Federation linguists and xenobiologists arrived to begin establishing formal communication protocols with the three creatures. The process was slow but successful. Each species turned out to have complex language structures and sophisticated social behaviors that had been completely overlooked in previous research. The Crystal Crusher, whose real name translated roughly to Stone Singer, was actually a master architect from a high-gravity world where buildings had to withstand constant geological upheaval. The Shadow Maw, called Twilight Walker, was a dimensional explorer who traveled between parallel realities. The Void Hunter, Star Tracker, was a long-range scout who could navigate between star systems using radiation patterns. Within a week, all three beings had been offered formal membership in the Galactic Federation, Within a month, they had been provided with transportation back to their homeworlds and compensation for their forced captivity. The incident at the Academy became known throughout Federation space as the Human Recognition Event. It led to a complete overhaul of xenobiology research protocols and the establishment of new communication standards for first contact with predatory species. Marcus found himself promoted to the newly created position of Director of Interspecies Communication, with a mandate to develop training programs for recognizing intelligence in non-traditional forms. But perhaps most importantly, it changed how the galaxy viewed humanity. Humans were no longer seen as primitive weaklings who had somehow stumbled into space travel. They were recognized as specialists in a field that no other Federation species had mastered: the ability to understand and cooperate with dangerous predators. As Marcus stood in his new office, looking out at the repaired Academy buildings, he reflected on what his grandfather had taught him during those hunting trips in Montana. "Son, the most dangerous animal is often the one that's scared and confused. But if you can figure out what it needs and show it you're not a threat, you'd be amazed how reasonable even the scariest critter can be." It turned out that wisdom applied throughout the galaxy. Humans might not be the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species in Federation space, but they were the only ones who had learned that sometimes the best way to deal with apex predators was simply to treat them with respect and try to understand what they really wanted. That skill, forged in the dangerous environments of Earth, had finally found its purpose among the stars. The night was about to reveal just how wrong everyone was about human limitations.